Let's go. All right. Town of Basalt Planning and Zoning Commission meeting Tuesday, July 19th, 2022. Let's call to order.
All right. Bill Marin.
Yo.
Kyle Oberketter.
Here.
Gino Rossetti. Eric Vozick. Rob Levitt.
Yes.
And Cindy Hirschfield.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Oh, thank you very much. First order of business, approving the minutes from June 21st, 2022. Does anybody have any changes or additions or comments to make?
I do have a comment, if anybody else doesn't. I thought those minutes were outstanding. Yeah, you rarely see minutes that reflect everything that was said in a meeting like that, and I was impressed.
That is lovely to hear.
So in light of that, would you be willing to make a motion to approve them?
If nobody has anything else to add, then I motion to approve.
Alrighty then. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
First, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 3A, public hearing on code amendments to Chapter 18 of the Town Code related to the town's tree removal regulations. Is that James?
Yeah, and we also have Chris Beiser, our town horticulturist and arborist, on the Zoom call. Chris, can you hear us there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. So this is a public hearing on code amendments to the tree removal provisions in Town Code Section 18-13. The intent is to provide amendments to that section of the code to allow the town arborist to more effectively administer the tree removal permits and to better clarify some of the tree removal mitigation requirements. The review process in the town code for code amendments requires for code amendments to Chapter 16, which is zoning, and Chapter 17, which is subdivision, that there would be a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Town Council. As this amendment is proposed to Chapter 18, which is the building regulations, the Town Code doesn't require a P&Z recommendation, but staff thought it would be good to have a courtesy review and recommendation from the P&Z to the Council because it relates to development review actions and zoning. So that being the case, would like to turn it over to Chris Beiser to give a little more background on the proposed amendments. Chris?
Yeah, so there's really two major components to the changes I'm proposing. One is very procedural, just updating some of the terminology to be more in line with the industry standard terminology, things like referring to trunk size as DBH or diameter at breast height, as opposed to caliper, which is kind of an older, more retired term for that. And then the other and more important component is actually just defining kind of what our tree mitigation requirements are. In the current ordinance, we more or less leave a single sentence line item up to, it's up to the sole discretion of the Public Works Director or associated affiliate to decide if and where that's reasonable or applicable, and then decide what those provisions are. So I've tried to essentially just outline some basic parameters that I've already kind of been loosely following, per me being the designated person that goes through with the enforcing the tree mitigation. So I'm just kind of running through the changes that I have in front of me that I've kind of outlined on that ordinance. The first section is by and large all technical changes, technical jargon changes. So all under that definition, things like that, just changing some of those words, rewording some things so it makes a little bit more sense of how it reads. There is a couple sections where it previously stated the Public Works Director had the sole discretion for this, but I also now include the town arborist or horticulturist has that is an appropriate designee for enforcing these mitigation rules. The larger and more important component is a little bit further down I added a whole section in there about what exactly the mitigation requirements are. There's some different it's kind of like a little dichotomous tree that I essentially work with. So it goes with, first you decide if it's a live or a dead tree, or if it's a diseased / storm hazard tree. And it just says that if one tree is removed, for every one tree removed that's live, it's a one-to-one tree replacement. And if it's dead, it's a one tree removed that's 10 inches or larger requires a replacement. That just more or less gives me something to point to when we have homeowners that are kind of asking for guidance on what to expect with mitigation, instead of pointing to an ordinance that says, it's kind of up to my discretion. I can point to something that has some pretty clear guidelines to that. I'd be happy to kind of run through every line by line if you have any questions, but there is quite a bit of addition there. This is the section that talks about where kind of my parameters for tree mitigation is. So if it's a healthy tree, it's a one-to-one replacement of trees, or one tree for every 10 inches diameter, whichever is greater. If it's a dead or diseased or risk tree, it's one-to-one replacement, or one tree replacement for every 10 inches, whichever is less. So it tries to remove some of that burden if a homeowner is trying to do the right thing. For instance, when there's storm damage or there's a dead tree, or for instance, I've had a lot of situations with pinyon trees these days where there might be an invasive insect that's taking them out. I'd like to really, kind of empower the homeowner to take that tree down without them feeling like the town is still kind of asking for them to do these things. That's really kind of the general guidelines that I followed in creating these mitigation requirements. There is a little bit more definition as well at the bottom about what we call comparable value. I've set at the moment a standardized $300 replacement tree fee. So that's in the case where I ask a homeowner to replace a tree per the mitigation requirements, and they say, I don't want to, or their current property doesn't allow that to happen, like there's too many trees already in the property. An alternative option would be for them to essentially pay a fee to the town so that we can plant that tree on public property somewhere. And that's the component with the comparable value. It also outlines the section explicitly stating that there are some restrictions in what we refer to as the environmentally sensitive areas of town. Almost always this refers to that 150-foot envelope within the edge of the high river level, that we essentially just require extra kind of review of the removals and potentially more mitigation beyond what the ordinance currently speaks to. Previously, there was actually no comment about that, and you kind of had to figure out whether or not you were within that ESA or not. I've also clarified the component about the valuation of trees. This doesn't come up very often in day-to-day use, but occasionally, if a tree has been removed illegally, for instance, previously we had set kind of a blanket $36 per square inch cross-sectional area of that tree to give it a value. And if you've ever calculated that for something like a 20 or 30 inch tree, we quickly start talking about $10, $20, $30,000 valuations on trees. And it doesn't really take into consideration the quality of that tree, the species of it, was it considered a hazard? And so I just use that section to elaborate a little bit more on where that valuation comes from, the research paper that we actually point to, basic tree evaluation that's been approved and recommended by the International Society of Arborists, of how we come up with tree valuation. So we have a little bit more of a leg to stand on with that valuation, as well as a little bit more flexibility as far as coming up with that final value if it comes down to a liability or a legal situation. And then again, in that section, I added a little bit more definition about what we consider things like legacy trees. So that's kind of a special case where we have something of historical value or something that is being kind of deemed as an important tree by the town or the general public, that gets special valuation. And I believe that's the end of the ordinance changes on that. on this section. Was there any questions about anything that's being changed? I'd encourage everybody to kind of read it because it does get a little bit nitty gritty in there on some details.
Is there a tree removal application, and what's the fee?
Correct. There is a tree removal application. I have updated that since coming into the position to better reflect things that are now reflecting in these updates that we have on here. Because previously, like I said, all of these changes I'm making, I am informally currently enforcing because it is up to the discretion of the Public Works Department to kind of come up with these mitigation requirements. It's more just trying to formalize them and create guidelines that we can point back to if there's ever any, concerns or really just any homeowner looking to what the town legally requires.
And I believe the fee is $35 still for tree removal permit?
I actually don't know if there is a flat any removal permit fee. I haven't heard of one. The fees only really come into play if we have mitigation requirements that the homeowner doesn't want to follow on their own private property. Then I require fees, but I don't have just to file the application, so to speak, fee.
Is the 10 inches, where does that number come from?
That number is a bit of a, there isn't any specific literature that comes from. It's kind of just a standard size that was set actually many iterations of this ordinance ago. I think it was made in coordination with what City of Aspen had set as kind of their minimum requirement for we need to concern ourselves with this tree removal. 10 inches is kind of in the industry just the size at which a tree stops being a juvenile tree and starts being a mature tree that has significant canopy value to it.
Would these changes in wording bring the policies more in line with how other towns' policies are worded?
Currently, our ordinance is almost verbatim taken from the City of Aspen, or at least what it was written as about 15 years ago when this original ordinance came up. I think that this verbiage kind of comes more into line with the realities of how Basalt functions on a day-to-day basis, where we try to play that balance of, asking for reasonable expectations or compensation from a homeowner removing an important tree, but also not trying to be a burden on homeowners trying to do the right thing, for instance, in dead tree removals or in hazard tree removals. I believe Carbondale actually has its own tree ordinance committee that sets these standards. I have not read them in the last year, but they're fairly similar to what we have required. And then, like I said, City of Aspen has almost verbatim what we currently have written down for the tree ordinance.
So do you have any language in here about if you remove trees for wildfire mitigation, since that's kind of a requirement that you remove the trees? So you're being required to move the trees and then required to remediate for the trees you were required to remove.
Yeah, I believe there is one section, James, I'm not sure if you'll be able to find it or not, but at the bottom of kind of where I lay out the mitigation parameters, there's a section that essentially says that, we follow these parameters loosely, but they're all subject to changes based on specific situations. And in that section, I believe I have a comment in there about removal for fire mitigation, where if the purpose of the removal is because they're trying to keep in line with fire mitigation code, we tend to waive mitigation requirements in that situation. And in practice, I work pretty closely with the fire department on when a homeowner claims that they're removing a tree for fire mitigation. I check in with them if they've done an official review of the site and given recommendations to that length, or if they haven't, to encourage the homeowner to first have someone come in and help them give official recommendations on removals for fire mitigation purposes.
It's under subsection H on page 18 of your electronic packet.
Okay.
And we do have other language elsewhere in the code that's not in the tree removal mitigation section that says that the fire district, fire marshal can direct removal if they believe that there's an issue from a fire mitigation standpoint.
So if someone has a building envelope and they're required to remove a perimeter, they don't have to pay for all the mitigation for the trees that,
That's
so they would for where the house actually was,
Yeah,
but not for the buffer zone around it.
not for the buffer zone. That's waived for mitigation purposes.
Yeah, because some sites within the town of Basalt are actually like forest. There's a few
Yeah.
like mine. So it's like,
Yeah, and
it's not really like,
go ahead.
it's not really like dead trees, it's sort of like standing deadwood. That, you know, it's.
Yeah, and you know, I've at the moment, fire mitigation has been more on a homeowner side proactive encouragement. You know, I'm not out there going after homeowners saying this tree is within 15 feet of the building envelope, et cetera. But if a homeowner ever comes up to me with the tree removal application where it is they're concerned about fire mitigation, that's usually where I then have a conversation with the homeowner and we'll then waive those fees as part of that flexibility on the general parameters we follow for tree mitigation.
And the fire district in the past has done assessments and reached out to certain areas and homeowners in certain areas to do assessments for reduction in fuels. And I believe they're still actively doing that, but haven't checked with them recently.
Yeah, I was working actually at a site about 4 months ago where that was still the case. So it is actively happening.
Yeah, because like on my site, I'm like losing trees a couple of years due to Ips beetles. And so, you know, it's like, well, you know, what do you do?
Right. And in that specific case, Ips beetle is considered a pest that we'd not want there. And it's like a consequential pest that would kill the tree. So that would be another situation where you would have any mitigation fees waived for just the sake of removing the dead tree that could spread that beetle.
That's understandable. Alrighty, this is a public hearing. Do we have, first off, does anyone have any further questions to ask of staff?
No.
No? So we should probably open this up for public comment at 6:22. James, do you want to handle that procedure?
Yes, so we don't currently have anybody in the waiting room other than the applicant for the next hearing, but if you would like to join online and make comments via Zoom, you could call in to the following number, which is 669, I'm sorry, actually it's 346-248-7799, and you would have to put in the webinar ID of 881-9771-8306. Once again, the phone number to call in would be 346-248-7799. And the webinar ID is 881-9771-8306. Want to give it
Jeopardy music?
Yeah, Jeopardy.
45 seconds here to a minute?
How much time do you think?
I'm watching the clock here.
And in scanning, I have the document open myself. A section that we didn't cover that's a little bit different. I did define removal of a tree, so what that consists of, whether it's, and I expanded it to be more than just what people would strictly include as removal of all the stems of the tree. if you are removing, I added some language about if you're removing greater than 50% of the total canopy of a tree, that is considered a removal for the case of the ordinance. This isn't the case, and I've run into this a couple of times where you have a multi-stem large tree and a homeowner wants to remove one of the two stems. In some cases, when you look at the canopy, it's a small component of the canopy because maybe that stem was dead in some cases, in which case the removal application would not apply. But in cases where you have either equal split of the canopy between multiple stems, where removing one stem would include removal of more than 50% of the actual live tree canopy, then we do consider that a removal, even though you would have one of those trunks still remaining after the fact.
We've cleared the minute time.
Okay, good. Since no one's in the room and no one has called in, let's close the public hearing portion of the meeting at 6:25. And comments, do we have any comments to make? Start with Kyle.
Nope.
Cindy? Rob? No, I don't either. This is a very thorough rewrite of the code, and I appreciate it. Do we have a motion to recommend this to council for approval?
I'll make a motion to recommend this to council as presented to us.
We have a first, do we have a second?
I'll second.
First and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next item, item 4A, public hearing on final PUD application submitted by Possumco LLC on Parcel 5 of the Sopress Meadows Subdivision PUD. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hey guys,
Hi.
small group today.
Gentlemen?
Everybody's enjoying their summer, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let me please share my screen here. And we do have the applicants here this evening, Michael Lipkin and Jeff Orsolak from Lipkin Warner. This is a continued public hearing on the Sopress Meadows Parcel 5 final plan application to construct 155 dwelling units on Parcel 5 of the Sopress Meadows PUD. This evening, staff would suggest hearing an update on the project discussion items from the preliminary plan phase from staff, and then hearing applicant comments and taking public comments because it is a notice public hearing, and then providing P&Z discussion. As a brief recap of the proposal, it's proposed to be 155 dwelling units on Parcel 5, which is a 12.2 acre property that's located between the Willets Lake and Willets Lane to the west. It's this central portion that is just south of the Park Modern project and just to the north of the Basalt Industrial Park. The project proposes the 155 dwelling units in 9 buildings. There are 7 free market buildings and then 2 affordable housing buildings adjacent to Willets Lane and the Basalt Industrial Park on the south end of the project. 46 of the proposed dwelling units are proposed to be deed restricted, and they're in these 2 buildings once again. The applicants are also proposing to finish the Willets Lake by regrading the bottom of the lake and finishing the 8-foot trail around the lake. Currently the trail ends in this area and also ends in this area, so the trail would be finished. The applicants are also proposing 3 access connections to the development, proposing an access connection off of Evans Road, an access connection through Lake Avenue over to the East Valley Road, and then also a vehicular connection on Willets Lane as well. In addition, they're proposing to have a three-way stop in the central portion of the development, as well as they're proposing a HOA-maintained playground in this area that has been reviewed by the Parks, Open Space, and Trails Committee. The review process is a three-step PUD process. The applicants have received their sketch plan and preliminary plan approvals. So we're in the final plan review, which entails P&Z making a recommendation to the town council. So this evening, staff would recommend hearing from staff about several discussion items that have updates since the preliminary plan review. Staff outlined a series of discussion items at the sketch and preliminary plan stages of the review. And there have really been 4 items that have significant updates. One being the affordable housing. The community benefits have changed slightly, and the access has an update to it. And then vested rights also have an update from the preliminary plan review. So to go into that, in terms of the updates on the affordable community housing mitigation, the applicants have proposed 46 deed-restricted units, and that was part of their preliminary plan application. It was up from 44 units in the sketch plan review. The applicants are also proposing a 0.75% real estate transfer assessment for affordable housing purposes, as well as a 0.25% real estate transfer assessment for funding of public transportation. And I'll kind of talk about that a little bit more here in the next topic. This is in addition to a 1% real estate transfer assessment that was required as part of the original Sopress Meadows PUD. So the overall transfer assessment would be a 2% for the project. And related to the affordable housing, at the preliminary plan meetings, the council provided direction to the applicants to see if they could make a portion of their affordable housing as for sale product instead of the entirely rental product that was previously proposed. And in response, as part of the preliminary plan review, the applicants proposed to make all of the 46 deed-restricted units a for-sale product that they proposed to serve the missing middle population and missing middle class in Basalt, to house individuals and families up to incomes of $250,000. The Basalt Affordable Community Housing Committee, BAC, reviewed that proposal and was not supportive of that revised proposal. And BAC asked for a meeting with the council to discuss it. And so BAC and the council met 2 weeks ago, and BAC desired a portion of the units to meet the Category 2 mitigation requirements that are in the town code. And so kind of the conclusion of that BAC council meeting was that there was a desire for some of the for sale product that was proposed and some of the Category 2 rental mitigation product to meet the affordable housing mitigation requirements. And so the way the conditions are set up for the final plan is that the applicants could construct their for sale missing middle product that is affordable to those making up to $250,000 a year as the first affordable housing building that would come along before COs were issued on the third free market building. And then as the second affordable housing building to be built, the second affordable housing building would be Category 2 rental, average Category 2 rental units to meet the town's mitigation requirements. And that second building, per the conditions, would be built before COs are issued on the fifth free market building. There's also direction in the conditions that would allow for the applicant to come back if the town changed the mitigation requirements in the code on the Category 2 product, and to take advantage of whatever changes to mitigation requirements might come along, because the Bach and council have directed staff to take a look at our mitigation requirements kind of going forward and do a review of those. So that's how the conditions are set up. Bach previously recommended approval of the physical layout and mix of bedrooms in the affordable housing. In terms of updates on the community benefits, by way of an update, the applicant has proposed at the preliminary plan stage to add a 0.25% real estate transfer assessment for funding of public transportation, instead of the provision that was previously in the sketch plan review for providing bus passes to the affordable housing tenants. They thought that was more conducive to reducing traffic, reducing parking, and just providing benefit to the community. In addition, there's still the 46 deed restricted units that I described. There's the overall 2% real estate transfer assessment, and they're proposing to finish the lake and the trail around the lake, as well as provide the playground as the list of community benefits. Other updates from the preliminary plan included the access. As was noted, the access to the 3 connections is proposed and included in the conditions. As part of the preliminary plan review at the town council level, David Mylar provided a letter on behalf of some of the neighbors in Park Modern and as well as the Willits townhomes. And he was not supportive of that connection in his letter. But once they understood that the emergency services really required to have the 3 connections, the Mylar negotiated with the applicants to remove the parking from Possum Lane in this area of the Park Modern townhomes, and also negotiated that the applicants would provide landscape screening from the buildings between the road and the buildings. So the applicants have done that as part of their final plan addendum. And that's been included in the conditions that the applicant comply with that. And then the final update topic is the vested rights. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended a 7-year vested rights as part of the preliminary plan conditions. The Town Council, as part of their review, actually recommended the 10 years of vested rights that the applicant is requesting, and that was primarily in exchange for the ability to have the for sale product on the affordable housing, because that was a big request of the council. It further requires that the public improvements be provided within 4 years from the approvals. So that has been included in the draft conditions that P&Z has in your packet. So this evening, staff would recommend hearing any comments the applicants might have, and then taking public comments as it is a public hearing, and then providing commission discussion. Staff would also be happy to go over any of the conditions that P&Z has questions about. So let me stop sharing my screen here. Michael, Jeff, do you guys have any additional comments you'd like to
I think James has pretty much updated you, and I think you've heard our explanation of what we're doing and why we're doing it before. So if you guys got questions, we'd love to answer them, but if you don't, I don't want to be repeating ourselves for your sake as well as.
All right, thank you. Rob, do you have any questions of staff or the applicant?
Just a couple. James, you mentioned a review of the mitigation requirements. The council and Bach are going to do that. Is that just the for sale for rent, or is it? more comprehensive than that?
It's more comprehensive than that. I think Bach and council are interested in figuring out whether, there needs to be additional categories added to the mitigation requirements above the 120% of AMI that is currently the top limit. But I think also the for sale versus rental is another topic that they'll want to.
And whatever they come up with will pertain to this project as well?
No, this
Oh,
is,
but the-
this is future amendments, but there is a condition in here that says that the applicants could come back to get the ability on the second building to apply future code amendments.
Okay, so
Yeah.
they can. A question, maybe applicant, the 0.25% RETA that's going to go towards public transport?
Yeah, so I guess it's something we volunteered to do, bus passes. Given that I think Basalt should be thinking about Basalt's needs, not Aspen's needs. So if there's an employer in Aspen who wants to have employees down in Basalt, the least they can do is pay for their employee to get there. I think the Basalt community has done, taxpayers have done more than enough for Aspen's workforce. We think, I guess if you ask me what our issues are in this valley, are preserving the kind of community we've gotten used to as everything's changing around us. Obviously, then the next issue with that is housing. But, we should find a way to deal with automobiles because they are our third biggest problem. And I think we should be looking at automobile mitigation as aggressively as we look at housing at this point. So we think that gives a lot more money to, I'm a big fan of the interior service we now have that connects the two communities. But I think we just gotta really focus on how we're gonna get people out of their own cars and how we move into a forward-looking approach to using car shares, Uber, all that kind of stuff. And I just wanted there to be a chunk of money that was certainly more significant than bus passes to try to get something moving.
Well, the two are not mutually exclusive.
Pardon?
The two are not mutually exclusive. Do you have an estimate on how much the 0.25 RETA would generate annually,
I have, so you're gonna have to give me a minute here.
roughly?
But if I'm not mistaken, I thought it might be 62,000 a year. But I'm remembering that, and I'm gonna sit here for a minute after I stop talking and do the math in my head and come back and give you a more complete answer. The bus passes aren't that big a deal.
I'm sitting here thinking the best way to get people not to drive is you put them on the bus and to give them a bus pass. I mean, that just sort of makes sense. And you made really good points too as to why you chose to do what you did. And being voluntary, I don't feel like necessarily we should be dictating the terms of what you do with that RETA.
I just want to be Basalt-centric about everything we do because, the symbiotic relationship between Aspen and the rest of the valley that has allowed these communities to grow gracefully. We've reached a point at which I think that Basalt has to think about Basalt before it thinks about Aspen's needs.
So I agree with you entirely, and we sat here 2 weeks ago and questioned whether or not we should dictate the terms of a voluntary contribution. So I'm just curious what your thinking was. I'm looking through the proposal we have, traffic calming. It's paragraph 14. This might be staff. It says within 5 years of the approval, if the TRC determines necessary on speed tables. But that doesn't seem right because it should be 5 years after it's fully populated. Right? 5 years after the approval, if it's only half built, you're not going to know what the traffic calming needs would be.
We could adjust that. I think the thinking is that we didn't want it to get too far out there, because there's a 10-year vested rights period, that we'd kind of lose our ability to enforce it.
I don't understand why.
Well, who knows if the developers are still here in that amount of time, 5 years after it's all populated.
Escrow money, the first thing I did in council when I was sitting right there was pay $185,000 for bollards in Willis because people are driving too fast. And I don't want to get into the situation again in 10 years where we need traffic calming and they come back to the town. So,
we could put the trigger out further. That was staff's concern, that
okay.
if you put it out so far that it's harder to,
But it would stay with the approval regardless of who the owner is, right?
it would stay with the
Okay,
approval.
So I would
Yeah.
suggest making it, at least 10 years, the vesting rights, if not till completion and occupation. So,
Yeah, I guess I agree with you, but what if you don't get the building, CO on the seventh building if it's an outstanding issue? I'm sorry, on our final building, we don't get our CO
right.
until that box has been checked.
Which
That it's
box?
either been, no, I just mean, you're saying the 5 years is too short.
Mhm.
It ought to relate to the.
Because you won't know the need till it's fully populated.
Yeah, so we don't get the certificate of occupancy for our last building until, if that's an outstanding issue that needs to be addressed.
Oh, so
I'm where you are.
CO last building still responsible for the speed
Yeah, if it needs to be done,
mitigation.
it'll get done.
I would say staff doesn't have an objection to that,
Okay.
but I think we're gonna have a decent idea once you're in the 7th or 8th building.
So
and
that's
this is
perfectly
populated.
reasonable.
Let's hold that to comments and we can discuss it.
Okay. I just had one more for staff. I know the traffic is on our list of discussion items. Planned infill of 26 units across from Willits. Sorry. In the summary of the traffic report, the trip generation calculation performed for the planned infill of 26 dwelling units across from Willits, plus the 155 new units.
I think they're being conservative. There is the 10-acre PUD, which had 10 units in itself across from Willits Lane. And then there are some other parcels that have not been built out across from Willits Lane.
Okay.
So I think that they're being conservative, but they're wanting to project,
So including those 26 additional trips at their number of 1,168 daily trips, I came up with 6.4 trips per unit per day, which seems lower than the normal number we use. I'm pulling it from here where they've calculated 1,168 trips, and I divided that by 155 units plus 26 potential units, and it comes out to 6.4 vehicle trips per day. That just jumped out at me as being a strange number.
What's your
So
question?
my question for staff is that the number we're using, 6.4 vehicle trips per day?
Oh, well, we did have Charlier and Associates do a third-party review on it at the sketch plan level and the preliminary plan level. And he reviewed it and thought that their methodology was correct. We've used Charlier and Associates in the past to do reviews of traffic studies. The two staff members you have right here are not transportation experts, traffic experts.
So my memory is a single-family home generates 10 to 12 trips per day. And I know that multifamily is considered less than that, but that just seemed really low.
I can follow up with a response from Charlier. That would probably be the
I'm
most
just trying to think it'd be
appropriate
helpful
way
for us
do
to know in the future as we go through these exercises too, how many trips a day we're using.
it. Okay,
That's just what
staff can get that
Thank you.
answer.
One thing I have to say, and it is not a scientific response, but there's 75 Park Modern units now. And I am just amazed how little traffic is generated by those. I don't know what the level of occupancy is and how long people are there. But I just don't see, I'm just kind of amazed by how little visible traffic there is. And, the next time you go by there, take a look,
You
it's
can
pretty
come walk the dog
surprising.
with me any morning of the week at 8
Pardon?
o'clock.
I'm sorry?
Come walk the dog with me at 8 o'clock in
Yeah.
the morning of the week, Monday to Friday, and there's a lot of traffic on Willits.
Oh,
I'm
I
not
know,
saying
I know
so.
it's on Willits.
Right.
I'm saying Park Modern, if that's a
Okay.
comparable kind of
Right.
thing, that kind of community isn't
I
generating.
can't say what that added to the mix, no, but
Yeah.
it's a busy street.
Rob, where were you taking those numbers from?
It came off the summary on number 6.
I think those are peak hour trips.
Why don't you continue, Bill?
All right. Thank you, Rob.
Cindy, do you have any questions?
Really just one question. The transportation fees that we were talking about, who would administer that? Would that come through the town?
That would be the town,
Okay,
correct.
okay. That's my only question right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. Kyle, questions, please.
It was mentioned during the presentation by staff that the playground would be maintained by the HOA, but it says in the report that the playground would be maintained by the applicant in perpetuity. So which one is it?
Well, it's the applicant or their successors, and the HOA takes the
I
successor.
imagine there's gonna be 3 HOAs, one for the free market, one for the for sale, deed restricted, and one for the,
That's not the way the applicant laid it out in the application. I think you're looking at one.
I don't think an HOA is typical for a rental building. All those responsibilities are the ownership of the
Fair
building.
enough.
So I think that's why that's the way it is.
so it's just one large HOA is the, okay, and then I guess the other question then is the deed restricted for sale pay less towards the HOA?
It's a separate HOA.
So there's 2 HOAs.
Yeah, there's an HOA for the free market, and an HOA for the
And as,
product, yeah.
okay, and so then as it's platted right now, the playground would end up on the HOA within the deed restricted?
Yeah.
And they would be fully responsible for maintaining that?
Yeah, and the truth is that we started out that it was a playground for that particular place. You know, the affordable, because we felt there were more families there, and we were getting a little bit further from the existing playgrounds that are already along the linear park. And the truth is, I think, yes, the HOA is gonna maintain it, it's adjacent to them, and I certainly don't think anybody's gonna be restricted. I mean, I don't think anybody's gonna chase kids away. So we'll just kind of see how that works, I guess.
Okay. Page 27, the parking section, says guest parking will be met between East Valley Road and Evans Road for the affordable housing. So is it across the street from them, or it is north of them in front of the free market units?
Gene, do you have
Yeah, I'll bring up a site plan.
Doesn't sound very good.
So the on-street parking on Possum and their portion of Lake is the guest parking as well as the lake parking. And the capacity there is more than required for the guest parking and the lake parking.
So the guest parking for the affordable housing is in this area. This is the resident parking for the affordable housing. And then sprinkled in this piece is the guest parking for the free market and guest parking for the free market. Correct.
Yeah, and lake access as well.
And lake access is down here as well.
And the guest parking is within the town right-of-way? They will maintain guest parking for the developer?
Yes, and that's the way it's set up with Park Modern also.
Okay. And then the parking for the affordable housing pieces, there's just a right-of-way between the privately owned parking?
Correct. The parking would be maintained for the affordable housing by the HOA, and the town would maintain the road itself.
So the town will just plow into the parking lots, and then the HOA will have to pay to dig themselves out?
No, the town's probably not gonna be plowing into the parking lots themselves. The way they have the snow storage set up, you know, there's some buffer areas here. But, you know, in the early morning, there's likely gonna be cars in here, so the town is not going to be able to push snow into the HOA parking.
And we've signed off on backing into right-of-way for full-time parking. Yeah. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Kyle. I have one question, similar to one Kyle just asked. With the removal of the street parking on, by Evans,
Yeah.
is there a net reduction of the visitor parking? Or is that visitor parking that was there moved somewhere else?
The capacity we have is greater than the required spaces, and so we were able to eliminate those spaces and still meet the town's requirements. for
But there's
parking.
less than there were in the previous.
There are less than there were at sketch plan, correct?
That's my only question. Any
Bill, wait, I
further-
wanna go back on that, because I believe that we had less, off-street parking at sketch as well, so.
Oh, so there was, at one point, there was more, and now there's a little bit less, but it's still more than is required.
Stuff's got moved around, yeah.
Okay, that's still it's all a good answer. Okay, any further questions of the applicant or staff? Nope. Okay, let's open up the public hearing portion of this meeting at 6:55 PM. James, could you do the mechanics?
Yes. And we don't have any attendees currently in the Zoom call, but if you would like to call in and make comments, the phone number is 346-248-7799, and you will have to enter the webinar ID, which is 881-9771-8306.
My favorite part of the meeting.
Love it.
Rest your fingers.
We still need music for this.
Yep.
Okay.
All righty. Since there's no members of the public in the room and no one responded to our call for comments, we'll close the public hearing portion of the meeting at 6:57 PM. And let's start with commissioner comments. Kyle, would you like to start?
I don't have any.
Cindy, comments?
I'd just like to say that I appreciate your willingness to work through all the feedback on the employee housing things. It seems like you've gotten conflicting advice or input from different sources. And I also appreciate your concern for making the housing beneficial to our town and not, just serving as a bedroom community housing for other towns in the valley. So, yeah, just wanted to give my thanks for that.
Thank you, Cindy. Rob?
No, just think Cindy put it very well. You guys, thanks for your patience.
Okay, I have a couple comments to make. Let's see, first, personally, and this is just my personal opinion, I was more in favor of staff's vesting rights, but council spoke and that's where we are. Also, I was also, just for the dynamics of affordable housing, which I have a little bit of experience with, I thought that an all rental product would work, serve the town better, but again, this is where we are and this is where the electeds wanted us to be, with a mix of for sale and for rent units. But also, I started out my tenure on planning and zoning a long time ago with the beginning of Sopress Meadows. Some very threatening words. And I'm really glad that we're about ready to close out this last chapter here. And I think it's been a great project and has served the town very well, and I think this is a fitting way to kind of tie it up. So if there's no comments, if we wanted to talk about, what were you wanting to talk about?
It was the, yeah, traffic calming.
Traffic calming.
Frame.
Time frame.
So I would either include that in, as part of a motion, if that's the best way to do it, or,
Make an amendment, you can propose an amendment to the existing conditions.
well, it's just changing what's already there, so I don't know if it's actually an amendment, but
This would be just a recommendation to council anyway, so if you wanted to,
okay.
should we recommend the council investigate the time frame for the traffic calming that you would suggest?
So moved.
Okay.
No, I make the motion that we approve as presented with the one recommendation that council examine the timeframe of the speed calming requirements.
Okay, that sounds pretty reasonable. Do we have a second for that?
Second that.
We have a first by Rob, a second by Kyle. All in favor?
Nothing else to discuss?
Let's do a roll
Quick,
call. on
Do a
this
roll
one.
call for this one?
Yeah.
Okay, well, do we have any further discussion about this? No?
And the reader, we're all good on?
Okay.
We'll do a roll.
Cindy Hirschfield,
Yes.
Bill Marin,
Yes.
Kyle Oberketter,
Yes.
Rob Levitt.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
And appreciate the comments. And I have to credit Aspen with inspiring the 0.25%, which is about 62.5, we think, in our first building, inspiring the contribution, because if Aspen thinks 388 cars at the lumber yard is a solution to anything in our valley, we need to think a whole lot harder about that. So if this were used simply first as a way to study how to get forward-looking rather than backwards-looking, and when I hear from the town of Aspen that they did a survey of the people waiting for housing and 88% said they wanted a car, I happen to think you could build that project without a parking space and keep it full all the time. I wouldn't recommend that, but I do think there's a future in transit that we have to embrace in this valley, or we are not going to survive. So simple as that. Thank you, guys. Sorry to soapbox it, but that's the one on my mind these days.
Your soapbox speeches are always enjoyable.
I was hoping Bill was gonna comment about the swing we replaced for you.
The what?
The swing we replaced for you, we gave you a different swing.
You changed the
You asked us to
swings.
change the.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, because those Danish swings over at the park.
It's nice.
Yeah, they need to be
Good.
comfortable for our aging population.
That would be us. All right, thank you very much.
What's wrong with the original swing?
No, they had this weird climbing structure and these, you know, like the play structure they have at the tree farm?
Crown Mountain?
Crown
you mean?
Mountain, yeah.
Yeah, Crown Mountain, where the tree farm used to be.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, at Crown Mountain, there are these Euro play structures, and people, the
Yeah.
kids just stand there going, what do I do with that? You know, and they have these things that spin around, everyone flies off, and anyway, so I just said something, I didn't think they were actually gonna do something about it.
I did see the pictures, the new ones in the packet. They're slick and safe.
Yeah, it's nice, it's very nice. Okay, we're at commissioner comments and staff updates. Since we're already commenting, let's have commissioners comment on anything they choose right now. Rob, do you have any comments to make?
I think I've said enough for tonight.
Okay, good. Cindy, comments?
And anything at all?
This
Anything,
is your
anything,
moment.
anything that's bugging you, you can bring it up now.
Yeah, I was down in Telluride a couple weeks ago, and I was down there researching a story, and as part of it was interviewing the woman who's the head of the Telluride Arts Council, and they have this really interesting structure down there. It used to be a warehouse. It's now a historically designated building, and the roof fell in 1979 because of snowfall. And they're in the process of transforming it into a performing arts venue, and they've been having concerts in there and other performances. And, you know, it's been really well received by the town. People love the vibrancy. And there was a new condo townhouse development that went out on the same block as part of this whole transfer warehouse thing. And I had a discussion with the woman about one of the residents in the townhouses is suing the Arts Council because of the noise from the performances. And he's only there a couple weeks a year, and he bought his unit being informed of exactly what was going on there. But he's suing them, and it's a big issue for the town. And I have to say, that's been one of my fears with the River Park. That's somebody in the $3 million condo isn't gonna like the noise of a concert out there. And you know, apparently they can sue even if it's written out for them. So I think that's something we should keep an eye on.
Just like the shooting range. And,
Well,
because they, what's that project up by the shooting range that?
The
everyone complains-
Wilds.
The
Wilds.
The Wilds?
Yeah, the Wilds.
Yeah, the Wilds. It's like, people went and bought those units for a lot of money at the time, and they just, I didn't know there was a shooting range there.
well, I mean, this was specifically spelled out in this guy's contract that this thing was here. Anyway, it's a fear that I've had when that's finished, what's gonna happen. So I do think it would behoove us to keep an eye on what happens with that suit, because it's been very
Well, we do have,
controversial in Telluride.
we do have language, and actually just saw this in the River Park Declaration this week, that talks about that there's gonna be public activity, noise, sound.
They apparently had language in this townhouse
Sure they
thing
did.
too.
Yep.
So, yeah, I would say just keep an eye on what happens with it.
Yeah, it doesn't stop people from moving next to an airport and complaining about the noise. That happens a lot. Kyle, do you have any comments to make?
No.
Neither do I, so, staff updates.
All right. Well, you guys should know that the town and Eagle County recycling event is July 30th up at the high school. So that's coming up. You might want to look at that. And then, was last week, I was at the Crown Mountain Master Plan first meeting. They're going to have several more of those meetings, but they haven't set the dates yet. There was good turnout, but certainly limited turnout at this first meeting, so I would watch the newspaper and maybe watch the Crown Mountain website for the next date, because if you have any interest in what's going on over there, they're going to need a lot of input. And we'll also update you as we find out the dates as well, but nothing is set, so that's hanging out there. We had originally talked about a joint meeting next week on the 26th to go over the Midland Avenue streetscape. We need to push that to August 9th, 5 p.m. We'll have you before the council meeting starts, so you can get your update on where we are with the designs and what elements have changed and how they've refined everything from the public feedback, and get your input as well.
Yeah. Could you send out a meeting invite for that? Because that works out really well for putting that in the schedule.
We absolutely will.
And also cancel the old one.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Do that, yep. And other than that, those are the main updates of the moment.
The Fields pushed their meeting for possibly staffing issues.
Yeah, so, Eagle County had a couple of applications that night, the Fields and, another application. And they did have a last-minute postponement, continuation to an undetermined date that had nothing specifically to do with the Fields. Has it been?
Yeah, they have a date shown on their website of August 17th for the continuation.
Is anybody taking the temperature of Eagle County commissioners on that project?
No.
Was there been any contact with them from our council or mayor?
I don't
We-
believe so, not at this point.
We saw, we had a staff letter.
We We-
well done.
We had the P and Z letter that went to the Regional Planning Commission, and it's also been carried over, and the BOCC has that letter as well. But I don't know of any conversation between the mayor and BOCC.
I know we're planning on being at the meeting when it happens to reinforce the letter.
The BOCC meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I was wondering if there's something we could do to honor Gino's years of service. He's thinking about leaving. I think it would be a very appropriate thing. I hope.
Thought he did leave.
You said
Well,
goodbyes.
he did, he said his
He made the
goodbyes,
roll
but he's
call
still on the
tonight,
roll
I was
call.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so he-
I don't think he sent a resignation letter.
He hasn't sent a resignation letter, and I'm hoping that, I'm gonna send him a special invite, to the August 9th meeting for the Midland Ave Streetscape, because I know he was really interested in that. And so hopefully he can get through another meeting or two before he submits his official resignation.
If, whatever we do to honor him, if we could do it, that has something to do with the redesign of Midland, because that was his main master plan issue all along from the beginning of the master plan. He championed that from the very beginning, always. So I know it's very important to him.
How long was he on?
8 or 9 years, 7 or 8 years?
Well, yeah, I think so. But he's officially on until the end of summer without resignation, so.
But it would be nice if he could be part of that August meeting. That would be really good.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, has there been any applicants? Or, I guess last meeting we thought there may be someone who was interested in P and Z seat.
We thought there might be, but we haven't received any applications yet. So, hit up your friends, your neighbors, and your community members.
How do you put the word out about it?
We're working on that. We're working on, we have it listed on the website, and we should probably advertise it on our social media again as well.
Yeah, I think for because if you didn't know specifically to look for it, I don't think people would just go to the website, or maybe putting it on like the Basalt community page on Facebook or something.
We also advertised it in the paper, but maybe we should do that again, too.
Are town councilors aware of the vacancies? Because it seems like they could also promote it.
Mhm.
Please, no one on this board think about running for council for a little while till we get ourselves built back up.
2 years.
2
Next
years?
election, right?
Yeah. All right, I think that's it. I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn. Anyone willing to
I'll
venture?
motion.
Cindy, yes. A second?
I'll second.
Okay,
Time to make
I'll
a
second. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
We're done. Thank you all very, very much.
You.
Everybody have a nice evening.